Ukraine faces major Russian push in Donetsk as 150,000 troops surge toward Pokrovsk. Donald Tusk says Poland must leverage its position or face a dark future. Here's the latest, so you will be in focus. Subscribe and stay tuned. Russia has concentrated around 150,000 soldiers in the Pokrovsk direction. Ukrainian Armed Forces Commander-in-Chief Oleksandr Syrskyi told the New York Post. The Kremlin continues its offensive operation, with the goal of taking full control of the Donetsk region. Ukrainian defenders are holding the line and preventing enemy infantry from establishing a foothold in Pokrovsk, according to the Ukrainian General Staff.
More than 300 Russians broke into Pokrovsk and are trying to reach its northern borders, reported the 7th Air Assault Corps of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. They took advantage of bad weather conditions and entered the city on light equipment through the southern outskirts. Due to dense fog, aerial reconnaissance operations are complicated, but the Defense Forces of Ukraine continue to detect and destroy enemy groups even in low visibility conditions.
The Defense Forces continue to detect and destroy enemy groups in urban areas, even in low visibility conditions. Since the beginning of November in Pokrovsk, 162 Russians have been eliminated, another 39 wounded. Various elements of the Defense Forces are involved in clearing the city: unmanned systems forces, assault and airborne assault units, special operations forces, security service of Ukraine, National Guard, National Police, and others. From a message by the 7th Air Assault Corps of the Armed Forces of Ukraine on Telegram.
The enemy has been actively storming the Pokrovsk direction for 2 months. Its goal is to encircle Pokrovsk and neighboring settlements from the north, south, and east, cutting off supply lines and driving out remaining civilians to seize the entire Donetsk oblast, explained Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Oleksandr Syrskyi. Russian command has deployed about 150,000 troops to the Pokrovsk area. It has also involved large mechanized units and 4 Marine brigades in the offensive. However, reports from Russian propagandists about capturing the city do not correspond to reality. The Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine reminded that in September, the Defense Forces of Ukraine conducted a counterattack and cleared a significant section of the front line.
This perception that the enemy has got practically everything and they're about to finish it is not true. The situation on the front line is really a tense one, where the enemy is carrying out a strategic offensive operation. They've collected most of the forces, creating domination in an attempt to breach our defense line to capture the area. They've been doing these active assault actions for 2 months without any material success. Oleksandr Syrskyi, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, in an interview with the New York Post. All information published by Russian channels and Western media reports about the alleged tactical and operational encirclement of the Ukrainian grouping in Pokrovsk in the Mirnorod area does not correspond to reality. Currently, the most intense combat actions in Pokrovsk continue in the industrial zone, the area of the meat processing plant, and the feed mill. It should be noted that in the area of responsibility of the 7th Airborne Assault Troops Corps, over the past week alone, about 250 Russian occupiers have been destroyed, the same number of sanitary losses.
On the battlefield, the Defense Forces of Ukraine rely heavily on drones.
The intensity of combat actions in the direction has significantly increased. Pilots of the 155th Separate Mechanized Brigade continue to detect and destroy enemy assault troops. We are working both in the city itself and on its southern approaches. The intensity of assaults is now higher than ever, and our pilots are also destroying more than ever. From a message by 155th Mechanized Brigade and of Kiev on Telegram.
The defense of the Pokrovsk-Mirnohrad agglomeration continues. Logistics, though complicated, is being carried out.
Yesterday, the units defending the city were delivered necessary weapons and ammunition. In addition, personnel rotation and evacuation of the wounded were conducted. Logistics and rotation of our units in the city of Pokrovsk are ensured in the same way. Active countermeasures continue against attempt by enemy infantry groups to establish positions in Pokrovsk. Search and strike operations continue in the city, destroying enemy positions in urban areas. Andriy Kovalev, spokesman for the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, from a publication by Ukrinform.
The Pokrovsk direction is a priority for the Kremlin, and it is here that the Russian army suffers record losses. Moscow is trying to compensate for them by recruiting mercenaries abroad and a large-scale campaign to enlist reservists. However, all this does not cover Russia's enormous losses in manpower, state the Center for Countering Disinformation at the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine, reported by Yulia Hranovska, UATV News.
Poland's geopolitical future directly depends on the outcome of Russia's war against Ukraine. If Kyiv is defeated, the situation will drastically worsen. This was stated by Donald Tusk in an interview with Gazeta Wyborcza. The Prime Minister of Poland emphasized that Warsaw must strategically use its position in the region and continue supporting Ukraine. The topic will be continued by Larisa Petruk.
Putin has long declared war on the collective West. Moreover, he has tools that could destroy the EU both as an organization and as a cultural phenomenon, stated the Prime Minister of Poland. The war Moscow is waging against the West is taking increasingly sophisticated forms and is far from limited to real physical threats, such as the intrusion of Russian drones into the airspace of European Union states, emphasized Donald Tusk.
I have repeatedly addressed our Western partners on this issue. A few years ago, it was very difficult to get through to them. Fortunately, they now understand that our assessment that Russia is in a certain way fighting the entire West was accurate. In such situations, Viktor Orban immediately cries that Tusk wants war, but this war is already underway. The war that Putin declared on the West is also happening inside our societies, and here it is happening in the most spectacular way. Donald Tusk, Prime Minister of Poland, in an interview with Gazeta Wyborcza.
Security experts confirm the Polish Prime Minister's opinion. Deutsche Welle cites one of the latest reports from the non-governmental analytical organization Globsec and the International Center for Counterterrorism. Analysts state that the Kremlin began a covert war against the West in parallel with the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Agents were most often recruited online, mainly through Telegram channels, sometimes with the help of relatives and friends. Russian special services mostly provoked recruits to commit arson and explosions. Experts are convinced that with such sabotage, the Federation is allegedly punishing Europe for supporting Ukraine and preparing for a potentially larger conflict.
From January 2022 to July 2025, 110 attempts at sabotage and attacks linked to Russia were committed on European territory. 89 of them were successful and 21 were prevented. Experts also identified 131 individuals involved in these incidents, of whom at least 35 had a criminal past. This involves propaganda and destabilization actions, spreading disinformation, sabotage at military and industrial facilities, espionage, inciting conflicts, and even conspiracies to commit murder, from a publication by Deutsche Welle on Telegram.
Russia uses drones to test the readiness of European countries to respond to threats, stated Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy in an interview with The Guardian.
We understand what they are capable of and what they can do, but Europe is so afraid of the word escalation, and they always think that Europe's steps, as developed states that respect law and values, seem to them that any response is escalation. But I believe the opposite. Russia does not like weakness, and it considers any intellectual responses, and Europe finds exactly such responses, any non-force intellectual responses, as weakness. They feel this alleged weakness and want, while no one has gained strength, to pressure, cause damage. All this is testing Europe, testing their reaction.
It is not worth counting on Russia being able to start another war only after ending its aggression against Ukraine. Volodymyr Zelenskyy is convinced.
In one interview, I said, they asked me if it could be that he starts somewhere without finishing the war in Ukraine. And I believe, yes, he can do that. And I believe we need to forget about this pan-European skepticism that Putin first wants to occupy Ukraine and then maybe go somewhere. He can do it in parallel.
German intelligence believes Moscow is already prepared to enter direct military conflict with NATO. This could happen by 2029. In the best case, it will end with a cold peace. In the worst, hundreds of thousands of Europeans will be forced to take up arms, stated the head of Germany's Federal Intelligence Service. Reported by Larisa Petruk, UATV News.
What's your take on all this? Share your thoughts below. This is UATV. Stay sharp, in focus, and stay safe.